Madame la Présidente de l'Assemblée Générale,
President of the General Assembly, Secretary General,
Mesdames et Messieurs les chefs d'État et de gouvernement,
heads of state and government, ladies and gentlemen,
nous sommes là car
we've gathered here because the time has come.
le temps est venu
The
de
time has
libérer les
come
48
to
otages.
free the 48 hostages detained by Hamas. The time has come to stop war, the bombing in Gaza, the massacres and the fleeing people. The time has come because there's a pressing urgency everywhere. The time for peace has come because we're just a few moments away from no longer being able to seize peace. This is why we have gathered here today.
Certains diront trop tard,
Some might say it's too late.
trop tôt.
Others might say it's too early.
Une chose est sûre,
But one thing is certain.
plus attendre.
We can no longer wait.
En 1947,
In 1947, this assembly decided on the splitting of mandatory Palestine across two states, a Jewish state and an Arab state, thus recognizing the right of each of them to self-determination. The international community granted to the state of Israel at last fulfilling the destiny of this people after millennia of roaming and persecution, and Israel founded a beautiful democracy there. The promise of an Arab state to date remains unfulfilled. Since then, there's been a long path of hope and despair intertwined, which Israelis and Palestinians have gone down, each in their own way. We have walked alongside them, each of us in keeping with our history and our sensibilities. But the truth is that we bear a collective responsibility for, to date, having failed to build just and lasting peace in the Middle East. This is what became evident to us on the 7th of October 2023, when the Israeli people suffered the worst terrorist attack in its history. 1,224 men, women and children killed, 4,834 men, women and children injured, 251 men, women and children taken hostage. The cruelty of Hamas and all those who collaborated in this massacre dumbfounded Israel and astounded the world. The 7th of October remains an open wound for the Israeli soul and for our universal conscience. We condemn it unequivocally because nothing, never, nowhere can justify having recourse to terrorism. Minds go out and hearts go out to the victims and their families. We've expressed our compassion to all Israelis and, first and foremost, demand for all hostages still held by Hamas to be freed unconditionally. The French paid tribute to the 51 French men and women assassinated on that day and all other victims of October 7th. We will never forget them. Never. Just like we will never stop the existential fight against anti-Semitism. The French people know the sting of terrorism, and our hearts remember the expression of the bonds of brotherhood following the terrorist attacks committed in Paris on the 7th of January 2015, when dozens of foreign leaders were in the ranks of those offering their sympathies, among which the Israeli Prime Minister and the President of the Palestinian Authority. We know that you cannot show weakness in the face of terrorism, but we also know the perils of endless wars. We know that right must always prevail over might. We know from our own history that a universal commitment to peace is the legacy of centuries gone by and the only way towards salvation. And on behalf of our friendship with Israel, our commitment to which has never faltered in the name of our friendship with the Palestinian people, for whom we want the initial promise of the UN Charter to be fulfilled, we want two states living side by side in peace and security to become a reality. However, currently Israel is further extending its military operation in Gaza with the stated objective of destroying Hamas. But there are hundreds of thousands of people who've been displaced, injured, famished, traumatized. Their lives are still being destroyed. Although Hamas has been considerably weakened, and despite the fact that negotiations on a permanent ceasefire are the surest means of ensuring the release of hostages, nothing justifies the ongoing war in Gaza. Nothing. On the contrary, everything compels us to definitively end it, since we didn't do it earlier. We must do this to save lives. The lives of Israeli hostages detained in atrocious conditions, the lives of hundreds of thousands of Palestinian civilians who are tormented by hunger, suffering, the fear of dying, mourning for their loved ones. We must save all lives, because for almost 2 years now, it is the denial of the humanity of the other and the sacrifice of human life which have prevailed. Yes, since the 7th of October, it is the life of the other that is being denied. We've been saying this since the first day of the war in Gaza. A life is a life. I know this because I held in my arms the families of hostages I met in Tel Aviv and in Paris. I'm thinking of the mother of Eata David, a hostage who was famished and displayed. I'm thinking of Nimrod Cohen, a 19-year-old hostage whose father I just met. I also know this because I was at the bedside of the Palestinian victims of Israeli military operations, refugees in Al Arish, women and children. I will never forget the way they looked at me. I know this because I met young people from Gaza who we are hosting in France. I'm thinking of Rida Baroud, who should have been with us today, who continues to bear witness to the distress of her loved ones in Gaza. A life is a life. We are duty-bound, all of us, to protect each other. This duty is indivisible, just as our common humanity is indivisible. There is a solution, a way of breaking the cycle of war and destruction. It lies in the recognition of the other, of his and her legitimacy, humanity, and dignity. We must reopen our eyes and see human faces there where war has deposited the mask of the enemy or the marks of a target. We must recognize that Palestinians and Israelis are living in twin solitude. The solitude of the Israelis following the historic nightmare of the 7th of October 2023, and the solitude of Palestinians. Palestinians at their wits' end in the face of this ceaseless war. The time has come, because the worst could still come to pass. The sacrifice of more civilians, the expulsion of the people of Gaza to Egypt, the annexation of the West Bank, the death of hostages detained by Hamas, or facts on the ground which could irreversibly change the situation there on the ground. This is why, this is the very reason that today, here in this chamber, we must pave the way for peace, because since July of last year, developments have accelerated. And at this point, we have reason to fear that the Abraham Accords, the Camp David Accords, could be called in question by Israel, and that peace would become impossible for a long time yet in the Middle East. It thus falls to us, this historic responsibility. We must do everything within our power to preserve the very possibility of a two-state solution. Israel and Palestine living side by side in peace and security. The time has come. This is why, true to the historic commitment of my country to the Middle East, to peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians, this is why I declare that today France recognizes the state of Palestine. This recognition is a way of affirming that the Palestinian people is not a people too many. On the contrary, this is a people who never says goodbye to anything, as Mahmoud Darwish said. A people with a strong history, roots and dignity. The recognition of the legitimate rights of the Palestinian people takes nothing away from the rights of the people of Israel, who France supported from day one and to the respect of which it is staunchly committed. This is why we're so convinced that this recognition is the only solution that will allow for Israel to live in peace. France has never wavered standing by Israel's side, even when its security was at stake, including when there were Iranian airstrikes. This recognition of the state of Palestine is a defeat for Hamas, just like for all those who foment anti-Semitism, nurture anti-Zionist obsessions, and who want the destruction of the state of Israel. This recognition by France goes hand in hand with others which will be announced today, and I thank them: Andorra, Australia, Belgium, Canada, Luxembourg, Malta, Monaco, Portugal, the United Kingdom, San Marino. They are here today. They answered our call issued in July and took the responsible choice, the necessary choice, the choice to opt for peace. Spain, Ireland, Norway and Sweden are also going down the same path, and many others did before us too. This recognition paves the way for useful negotiations, useful for Israelis and Palestinians. This path is a path towards a peace and security plan for all. France and Saudi Arabia submitted this plan to this assembly, and it adopted it by a large majority. It carries our common ambition to break the spiral of violence and to change the situation on the ground. We managed to take a step towards one another, to move away from our habitual stances and to set concrete objectives. We must now set in motion a cycle of peace that meets the needs of all parties. The top priority of this peace and security plan, and it's very urgent, that is to ensure the release of 48 hostages and put an end to military operations throughout the territory of Gaza. I commend the efforts undertaken by Qatar, Egypt and the US to achieve this. I ask Israel to do nothing more that would thwart these efforts coming to fruition. Hamas was vanquished on the military front as we neutralized its leaders and decision-makers. It must also be vanquished politically to be truly dismantled. As soon as a ceasefire is agreed, we must mount a massive collective effort to provide assistance to the people of Gaza. I'd like to thank Egypt and Jordan for their commitment and recall Israel's absolute obligation, that is to facilitate humanitarian access to Gaza to assist its population, which has lost everything. The second priority is to stabilize and to rebuild Gaza. A transition administration incorporating the Palestinian Authority, as well as the young people of Palestine, together with security forces, the establishment of which we will accelerate, will have the monopoly over security in Gaza. It will implement the dismantlement and disarmament of Hamas, and this with the support of international partners and the necessary means required for this difficult mission. France stands ready to contribute to an international stabilization mission, as well as to support, together with our European partners, the establishment and equipping of Palestinian security forces. As soon as negotiations permit, the Security Council could decide to deploy a civilian and security support mission, liaising with the Palestinian authorities and with the consent of the Israeli authorities. Furthermore, it will be up to the state of Palestine to give hope to its people, tested by years of violence and occupation, division and negligence. It will be up to the state of Palestine to give its people a framework for democratic expression, a framework that's been renewed and that is secure. President Mahmoud Abbas committed to this before Prince Mohammed bin Salman and myself. He forcefully condemned the terrorist attacks committed on the 7th of October 2023. He reiterated his commitment to disarming Hamas and committed to excluding Hamas from future governance in Gaza, as well as from future governance throughout Palestinian territory. He reaffirmed his commitment to combating hate speech and promised an in-depth overhaul of Palestinian governance. France will pay close attention to the full implementation of all of the commitments made to us. This renewed Palestinian Authority is a necessary prerequisite for the success of the indispensable negotiations we'll need to resume to come to an agreement on each of the final status issues. It's within this framework that I will be able to decide to open an embassy to the state of Palestine as soon as all of the hostages detained in Gaza have been freed and a ceasefire has been established. What France will be demanding of Israel will be just as considerable. Together with our European partners, we will be pegging, that is, our level of cooperation with Israel to the provisions, the measures Israel will be taking to put an end to the war and negotiate peace. It's thanks to this path that we will get a state of Palestine which is sovereign, independent, and demilitarized, bringing together all of its territories, recognizing Israel and being recognized by Israel in a region which will at last see peace reign upon it. What I also expect of our Arab and Muslim partners, who have not yet done so, is for them to uphold their commitment to recognize the State of Israel and to engage with Israel in normal relations as soon as the State of Palestine has been established. In so doing, together we will demonstrate dual recognition for the benefit of peace and security of all in the Middle East. Ladies and gentlemen, this is our peace plan. It establishes a demanding mechanism to end the war and enter into the negotiations phase. It allows for Israeli-Palestinian peace to be the first pillar of a new peace and security architecture in the Near East and the Middle East. It lends credibility to the possibility of further economic integration. Nothing will be possible unless the Palestinian authorities take full ownership of our renewed ambition so that we can at last achieve the two-state solution. I know that they are reluctant. I know that they harbor fears. And with the utmost respect, I hear the Israeli people, their sadness, their fatigue. But I want for the Israeli authorities to also hear this and to in turn take on commitments. I know that the Israeli people and the Israeli leadership have the strength to do this. I remember when I was a young man, when I learned of the horrible assassination of Yitzhak Rabin, almost 30 years ago. He was killed for wanting peace. When death was about to claim him, the heroic warrior of the State of Israel said, and I quote, I fought so long as there was no chance of peace, end of quote. But today, there is such a chance. Today, here, 142 states are proposing this peace. They're extending out their hands, ready to be shaken. So yes, the time has come to put an end to the war in Gaza. Massacres, death, right now. Urgency is what drives us. The time has come for Israel to live in peace and security from the Galilee to the Red Sea, through the Dead Sea and the Lake of Tiberias and Jerusalem. The time has come to no longer talk about the existence of the State of Israel. It's self-evident. The time has come to do justice to the Palestinian people and thus to recognize the State of Palestine, brotherly country, a neighbor in Gaza, in the West Bank, and in Jerusalem. The time has come to cast out from these lands the vile face of terrorism and to forge peace. Yes, to forge peace. This is what has brought us here today. And we're very hopeful that we will be able to forge it. It is a choice we must make. It is our duty. Peace is much more difficult. It demands much more of us. than all wars.
Mais le temps est venu.
The time has come.